Yes, you're still watching TVC Breakfast. We now take you to the center of unity, where Eshamamo Imodu and Tijesu Adeoye are in the Abuja studio for the FCT Brief. In Akwana, Abuja, happy Friday. Over to you.
Happy Friday, Ria in Akwana, Lafia Kalo.
Thank God it's Friday, and what a good time to go into the weekend. Like we usually say, take your time this weekend to rest. TJ, I'm talking to you.
Well, first of all, let's finish what's on the table,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. So let's go.
Well, let's go into what we have for you today. Good morning and welcome to FCT Brief, your trusted window into the heart of the nation. And today our focus is on a matter that sits at the core of national survival, Nigeria's evolving security landscape. In recent years, the security terrain of Africa's most populous nation has undergone significant shifts from insurgency in the northeast and banditry in the northwest to separatist agitation in the southeast and rising cases of kidnapping across the country. Each phase has tested the resilience of our armed forces, the adaptability of our intelligence community, and the confidence of citizens in state protection. The federal government has continued to recalibrate its security architecture in introducing reforms, equipping personnel, and deepening interagency collaboration. Yet, questions remain about the effectiveness of these strategies in addressing the changing nature of threats, which now include cybercrime, terrorism financing, and transnational organized crime.
As Nigeria strives to secure its borders and stabilize its internal space, experts say it is time to move beyond reactive measures towards proactive intelligence, community policing, and sustainable development that tackles insecurity at its roots. So this morning on FCT Brief, we'll be dissecting the nation's security evolution, the gains, the gaps, and the path forward. Stay with us as we engage General Lucky Orabo, retired, who is the former Chief of Defense Staff, in reviewing how far Nigeria has come in redefining the architecture of national security in a complex and dynamic environment. Nice to have you join us this morning.
You're welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's go this way. Now, while you were the Chief of Defense Staff, Nigeria faced a lot of multi-front security challenges. We had the kidnapping, we have secessionist agitation, we had terrorism, we had banditry. Now, looking back, what would you say were the toughest institutional and maybe political constraints you had in helping your strategy succeed?
Well, first and foremost, let me thank you for inviting me, and I say that I'm so delighted to be here. No doubt, the time I, led the armed forces as Chief of Defense Staff, there were a good number of problems. Even before my assumption of that high office, there were also, a lot of challenges. But what I would say in difference to your question is that at the time, all the issues, in your introduction, were quite profound, and even now they are still there, but then, of course, at different degrees. So the Northeast was a huge challenge, and then, of course, Northwest was also rising. And of course, you equally have the Southeast challenge, the IPOB, ESN challenge. Then, of course, a little bit of the Niger Delta crisis, especially with respect to, pipeline vandalism, amongst several other things. And of course, these are, in the Southwest, we had, the agitations by, Sunday Igboho's group, the Yoruba Nation, among several others. So there were a plethora of issues that we had to deal with at the same time. And each of these challenges had their own approaches. I mean, they were not, it's not the same approach in dealing with them. And what I found, of course, was that it would appear, and even currently, that the military and the security agencies, it was like, this is a problem, you solve it. When actually the whole essence of security provisioning is everyone's responsibility. But of course, there will be those who will be at the forefront, but there are those who, certainly will give supporting, who will be playing supporting roles. But by and large, I believe that a lot has happened, and then building on what we did is also improving. I believe that in no time we should be able to have a reasonable peace. I mean, you can't have absolute peace anywhere around the world. What you deal with is relative peace. But at the core, I believe that governance must take greater roots.
Nigeria's security challenges have long had an ethnic and religious coloration,
Correct.
and oftentimes exploited by insurgents to divide communities. Now, and very recently, we saw claims by the United States government suggesting state-backed persecution of Christians in Nigeria, and this has raised serious diplomatic questions and moral questions as well. As the former Chief of Defense Staff, who has once coordinated internal security operations, how do you interpret these allegations? Are they a reflection of intelligence failure, poor perception management, or a deeper weakness in Nigeria's counter-terrorism initiative?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that question. No doubt there are issues. I mean, we have killings across the board. With, from my personal assessment, has no leaning to any religious. I mean, what I mean is, I do not see it as something targeted at a particular religious faith. But of course, killing of both Christians and Muslims. But then, for me, I rather see them as Nigerians. Nigerians are being killed on a daily basis for whatever reasons. The motivations for those killings is a different issue entirely. But you see, you must also understand that across the world, international relations deals with, how, nations perceive other nations. And so your perception, the perception of those nations or the assessment that they have is not just from the blues. So this is the reason why you have, missions, that is embassies and high commissions, amongst other consulates that you have across nations, representations, of one country in another country. And so the whole essence is for them to also gather some form of intelligence from the internal reporting, internal developments within the country. I believe that that report which you just seen, which you saw, may not be unconnected with some of the impressions that we have locally, which I mean, if right here we say this is what it is, then of course you cannot blame some other persons when they say, that this is precisely what it is. In any case, you also saw the, the embarrassing situation relative to the so-called fact-finding, as it were, what the outcome of that report, what it says. So for me, I believe that we should be more concerned with our assessment internally rather than external assessments. And so if we're able to, change the narrative by way of having more inclusive conflict resolution mechanisms, and then, of course, bringing some element of transparency into what we do, greater transparency into what we do, then, of course, the rest of the world will have no choice but to align with our path, in terms of our approaches to problem solving. So for me, I'm not so worried about external assessment. I'm more worried about what we see, and that leads me to the fact that linking up to the earlier comment that I made, which is that it appears that the military and the security agencies are left as, if I may use the word, orphans to address some of these issues, which is not right. Wars are fought, by the states. It's not institutions that fight war. The campaign plan must be designed by the states and directed by the political leadership, and then of course we have the organs, such as the military, the police, and other agencies as tools, if you like, as implementing agencies. And so they are not responsible for answering questions as to what the campaign, speaks to. And I think that's where we've gotten it wrong. And I believe, and of course, whilst I was CDS, we made a lot of changes, hoping that the political, leadership will be able to understand that, to take over that burden, and to see themselves being embedded in the entire campaign matrix. But that has not happened even up to now.
Now, there was this approach just soon after you were appointed the Chief of Defense Staff. You talked about the whole of a nation approach.
Correct.
I want to believe that the whole of a nation approach, it's like you're saying, okay, both the military, the internal policing, the people should be part of fighting all this national challenge we do have. But would you say that when we do not trace some the very sponsors of these acts and bring them to justice, that we're being negligent of one of the very important tools in fighting all these malaise we have?
Yeah. So it would appear so, but then there's no nation, there's no government anywhere that will be aloof. I mean, no agency, responsible agency, will be aloof. When you have intelligence as to those who are behind certain criminal acts and you don't go after them. It's not possible. But the point is, what is the integrity of the intelligence that you have? So it is the level of the efficacy of that intelligence that will help you to be able to do the work. I'm glad that you did mention some of the approaches that it's also happening anyway. I mean, they are all building blocks, as it were, wherein we try to see in different regions, geopolitical zones, to see how we can bring in other stakeholders to join hands in doing what we did. But of course, that's not entirely a military task. But then, because of what I said, what I identified earlier on, that's what's quite profound. And I felt, look, let's do this. So we went to the Southeast and began to talk to both the traditional institutions as well as even retired officers, across the entire geopolitical zones. And then the building block of that is what you now see. I mean, I'm sure you now see that Southeast is relatively calm because foundations were laid for what we could build it up. The same thing happened in the Niger Delta. I was all over the creeks, talking, and then, of course, with NNPC staff, with those from the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, and then also crafting, what we now see as pipeline, surveillance and all that. When the idea came, we felt that, look, governance has to have some element of inclusivity. And so, at the end of the day, what really are the reasons behind those who are going to break the pipelines? What really do they want? They want to be part and parcel of, the economic inclusion, as it were. And so we felt if that would be a better approach, that we can engage those, from the communities, let there be arrowheads, let them be part and parcel of, securing the assets that we have. And today you are seeing the results, such that the production, oil production has improved. And then, of course, there's hardly will you now see that there's a report as to pipeline vandalism and so on and so forth. Ditto for the North Central, and then, of course, the Northeast and the Northwest, wherein we kept discussing with of course a hybrid of both hard and soft power. But then on the soft power element, discussing with some individuals, some opinion leaders, to say, look, this should be the approach. This, in my view, is what we need to heighten to know that the military and, of course, security agencies can no longer kill their way into victory. It's no longer feasible.
Indeed. Well, you wrote the book Scars, Nigeria's Journey and Boko Haram Conundrum. Well, we'll talk about that when we return from this short break. Don't go anywhere. We still have more. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Progress no dey happen just like that. It dey come from support when you need am.
Mommy, I got the school fees. You too much.
Na money point o.
Money point, thank you.
Customer, na transfer abi? Confirm.
Bro, na transfer.
Na money point oga. Oh, na confirm.
Progress na peace of mind when you know say payment go land as sure banker. Progress na small wind where they carry person go far.
sure yourself go make am. Mo go buy ball.
Victor, even you they use money point?
Of course now, they use money point.
Confirm.
Money Point, made for your progress.
Our major currency unit is the Naira, while the minor unit is the Kobo. They are both in notes and coins. The Naira is more than just a medium of exchange. It bears the images of our heroes. So, stop abusing the Naira. It is a criminal offense to spray the Naira at events. Stop stepping on the Naira. It's not your enemy. Do not squeeze, ruffle, or write on the Naira. Handling the Naira with dirty or oily hands can deface the Naira. Love the Naira as you love yourself. Be a real Nigerian.
This message was brought to you by the National Orientation Agency, NOA.
We're glad to have you back. This is still FCT Brief, and we'll still remain with our discussion on national security. Now, before I went on the break, I spoke about your book, Scars. You described your book as an awakening reality, one that calls for credible solutions to Nigeria's security crisis. But having once coordinated Nigeria's front lines, why is Nigeria unable to surmount these security challenges?
Well, thank you. Let me say this. Politics is managed conflicts. Bad politics leads to violence, and this is the whole essence of what I'm trying to say in this book. Now, Boko Haram did not just come. Boko Haram is only a symptom of some of our problems. So it's an offshoot of the problem, the deeper problems that we have as a people. The problem of, lack of unity, lack of national cohesion, amongst several other things that we have across the nation. So if you recall, at the outset of the Fourth Republic, Boko Haram agitations, which came from Sharia proclamation, was only a means of people ventilating their grievances, what they thought that they needed to be able to make, their political leverage to be higher. Today, it's history. Nobody talks about Sharia anymore. So, because, what eventually it gave birth to, which is Boko Haram, has not taken our attention. So, the point I'm making here is that Boko Haram and all the offshoots of insecurity that we have are as a result of political challenges arising from so many things that have to do with our fault lines. And so in this book, I've chronicled some of them and how I think that we can go about solving them. The first is that we have to have national reconciliation. We have to have a psychological reorientation on on conflict mitigation. We must have political reorientation. We must have security sector reforms, because sometimes when the military and of course all the security agencies are mentioned, you realize that nobody asks what is the capacity and the efficiency level of these agencies. It's not just by name. You don't. And of course, I also try to talk about what national security strategy, what it deals with. The police that we have, how effective is the police? What enabling instrument, or not enabling instrument? What capacity that will make them to be effective? What do they have? How are they trained? What is the level of their training? What is the level of their equipment? Ditto for the military, ditto for the DSS, ditto for customs, ditto for immigration. So these are, but of course, there are, there are improvements that are being made. But that does not mean that we've gotten to the optimum. We have not even gotten to 50% of what the requirements are. So sometimes when people talk about how much has been spent, so much money is in relative terms. So much money means what? What does so much mean? Relative to what? So for me, we need to understand the nuanced nature of the challenges before us. Which role must be played by who, and then what capacity. You find that most times we keep duplicating agencies. Currently, I mean, recently now we've come up with, forest guards. What's the meaning of that? And yet we have been told long before now that Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps will be able to address some of those issues. Tomorrow, by the time the forest guard fails, now we want to create another one. For me, all the agencies that we have, they are more than sufficient. But then you must understand, you must first and foremost assess their capacity, assess what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and then do something to be able to offset the vulnerabilities that they have. It is only when you do that, then of course you now begin to see that we're making a lot of progress. Okay. The military as we have today, I mean, it's not something one may have to go into to the public to do. But I mentioned a little bit of it. What my time as the CDS, what the kind of intervention that one had to do to be able to convince the political leadership at the time, amongst others. Ditto for the police. That's why there has to be security sector reform. There is no society that can thrive without an efficient policing structure.
All right. I like the fact that you ended that statement with an effective policing structure. I'm going to ask that. What kind of police reform should we have? Because oftentimes, if we look at the budgetary allocation and you look at what is allocated to the police, sometimes it's a far cry. And if we really want to win this war, for instance, if the military goes to capture a territory, you need another force to be able to hold it while they advance. Now, what kind of reform? So that it will not just be a nomenclature, we need reform. What kind of policing reform do we need so that we can complement what the military is doing?
Well, so I'm glad that you asked that, and which has been, the very topical issue. We have always been politicizing security issues. Even this issue of policing now has also been politicized. Exactly. We hear each time, the idea of community policing is advanced. The counter, narrative will be, it will be misused by politicians. I wonder what that language is, what it means. Yeah. And so every of our problems, that's why I started by saying that, politics is managed conflicts, and bad politics is what leads to violence. So until we're able to, the political class are able to come to terms with the reality of our time and the reality of our environment, then we'll run in circles. For me, the policing that we need is such that from the grassroots, you're able to, have an efficient policing, structure that should be able to not only, contain minor issues, but also serve as early warning mechanism that can escalate whatever challenge, whatever response that is required from a higher echelon. But currently we don't have. But in any case, if you go to any of the police station, at the local level, they say the DPO's office, for God's sake. I mean, it's an eyesore. You don't even, there's no vehicle. In some places, there is no vehicle. Even when you have vehicle, very rickety. Even right here in FCT, you see some. Yes, of course, some improvements have been made, but you can't be comfortable. You can't be confident when you see, the structure of the police. So also it is for different other agencies. For me, the reform that I am advocating is such that there will be a thorough assessment of the strengths and weaknesses of the police, and then a commitment, a political will to be able to implement whatever the findings are and whatever suggestions are made in that regard. So if we're able to do this, and then of course investing heavily in their training, in reorientation, and that's why I also believe that the National Orientation Agency, well, a lot of improvements have come, but I think it's more limited to TV. I want to see them to go to the grassroots to see some of those ideas that we see on TV being implemented. Because the aggregate of all this is actually what is policing. Exactly. It's not necessarily until you have somebody who is in uniform that you could call police. No, the aggregate of it, that's what I refer to as
Still on this issue of Boko Haram,
yes.
A U.S. congressman was alleged that the USAID funded Boko Haram. That
Correct.
claim has since been debunked.
Correct.
But there are still suspicions that some international NGOs and aid networks may indirectly be fueling this conflict. Now, how credible are these suspicions, and how deep does that complicity run beneath the guise of humanitarian work?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it. I also mentioned it in my book, Scott Perry, what he said, and then arising from, and more or less what he said at the time, validated, some of the impressions that have been created within the, Nigerian space. And you recall that Amnesty International, as well as Reuters, some of the reportage that I've had against us, and which, of course, the congressman now came up, and including the Department of Government Efficiency that also touched on the fact that there was something that that was done to be able to undermine using, of course, USAID. Among several other reportages. But for me, the whole essence of the reference to that in my book is to say that the U.S. has been one of our foremost partners in countering insurgency and terrorism in Nigeria. And so if such a weighty allegation was made, so it behooves on the Nigerian government to have some form of interaction with the U.S. government in order to obviate that we do not have fifth columnists that are working across purposes with our partnership. So this is the whole essence of my reference to it. So for me, I do not also, lose sight of the fact that in a war environment, anything is possible. And so rather than blame other external actors, it calls for us to begin to reevaluate our internal mechanisms. How do we allow external actors to come to work within our space? What is the assessment criteria that we're able to, set up? What are the benchmarks? How do we ensure that there is monitoring? What kind of monitoring mechanism do we put in place to ensure that those who come here are here for altruistic objectives and not to be those who will be working at variance with what we desire that we have in that engagement.
Okay, there's a new terror group that has been alleged to linked to Boko Haram. So Wulo terror group. Now, they do. What kind of intelligence do we have? And when these kind of groups are in the incubating stages, before they launch out, do we have intelligence to nip in the bud before they come out? When I think the last current chief of army staff was appointed, I think just before he was appointed, there was a terror group that was said that had come into space. So why do we keep having these?
Okay, so let's take it this way. Okay. The world over, criminal elements evolve, just the same way nation states evolve, governments evolve. There are dynamics in every sociopolitical activities that we have as humans. So as this is the same reason why you have some form of transformation of ideas, transformation of processes, including those by these terrorist groups. So why and that's the reason why security agencies must be ahead of them. And I'm glad that you talk about intelligence in this sense. So they themselves, they are not asleep. Those who want to create criminal franchises, they are not asleep, because that to them is their mainstay. Mainstay in the sense that it might not necessarily be for gains, for economic gains. It could be able to perpetuate certain ideas and so on and so forth. So for us here, there are different agencies, intelligence agencies that we have. Of course, from the external front, you have the National Intelligence Agency, you have internally the Department of State Security, and then, of course, even each of the security agencies, you also have intelligence outreach. So for me, going forward, I believe that even though a lot of building blocks have been done, for us to have a more potent way of gathering the intelligence, and so that means that there must be more investment in some of the tools that are required, And then, of course, at the Office of National Security Advisor, there is a Joint Intelligence Board. They usually meet, and then where intelligence is exchanged. But for me, I think that there has to be greater response. That when intelligence is received, if the response required, some legal enabler, then of course we need to speed up the action in that sense, so that the response can be quicker and for us to be able to nip problems in the board. But let me also mention that sometimes what you do not see is far more than what you see.
Yeah. What a powerful way to end the conversation. We must say thank you so much for your contributions on the program, General. It's a delight speaking with you, and I'm definitely going to read this book. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And I implore everyone else to get a copy for themselves.
Thank you.
Well, that's where I'll leave our conversation today. We're glad you could be a part of it. We'll now hand you over to Lagos, where Ria and the rest of the team are standing by to continue with the rest of the show.
Well, thank you so much, Abuja. TJ Su, I'm definitely coming for that book. Thank you so much.